Om Tava Kathamritam Tapta Jeevanam Kavibiriditam Kalmashapaham Shravanamangalam Srimadatatam Bhuvi Granantiye Bhurida Janaha. So, we begin a new chapter today. The chapter is Sri Ramakrishna with Pran Krishna M and other devotees. Pran Krishna Mukherjee is a devotee of Sri Ramakrishna, and this chapter has been named, the heading of this chapter is as what I just mentioned now, Sri Ramakrishna with Pran Krishna Mukherjee M and other devotees at Dakshineshwar. So, the first part of this chapter begins with a description of who all were there. As you are aware, throughout this gospel, we'll find Sri Ram M tries to create a word picture of exactly what was the environment like, who were the people, what were they doing, and why had they come, where had they come from. As far as possible, tries to create a beautiful background, and based on that, all the conversations take place, and it becomes more relevant when you know the background of the people who are actually taking part in this conversation. So it is 8 a.m. It is a Saturday, and the date is 5th April 1884, the 24th day of Chaitra. Chaitra is a month in the Bengali calendar, and M has come to Dakshineshwar, and he sees Sri Ramakrishna is sitting on a smaller cot in his room. That is normally what he did. He used to sit on the smaller cot when he talked to devotees, and devotees would either sit on the floor or a carpet or some kind of mat which would have been spread before visitors came. So a number of devotees, including one of the main devotees who has come is Pran Krishna Mukherjee. So they are all sitting on the floor. That is the Indian system. Normally, Sri Ramakrishna is to sit on the cot, and everybody who came to listen to his Kathamrita or immortal words falling from his lips, which have been recorded by M, they used to sit in a semicircle around him. It was quite a big room. Even today, if you go, some 30-40 people can easily sit with all the partitions and all they have made. In spite of that, 30-40 people can be accommodated. It's a very big room. So about Pran Krishna, M has just given a brief description. He says he is from the aristocratic Mukherjee family of Janai. Janai may be a place it is in Calcutta, but his home is in Shampukur Bhati, the second place after Dakshineshwar. Sri Ramakrishna moved to Shampukur for his treatment in Calcutta, and then he shifted to Kashipur for a much longer time. So that Shampukur area was where most of the devotees lived. That is why they decided to shift there. Finally, Kashipur is in those days, it was a little away from the main city. Inside the city, but a little away from where the devotees lived. Most of them stayed in the Bagh Bazaar and Shampukur area. So, this Pran Krishna Mukhopadhyay or Mukherjee, he is the head of the auction house of a company. It's a multinational company, Mackenzie Lyall, known as the Exchange. It was popularly known as the Exchange. So it was an auction house during the colonial times. The British used to, many artifacts were for auction. A lot of rare things which would be found, the Rajas and Maharajas would be auctioning. So there was a lot of antiques which were being auctioned. So this was an auction house, and it was popularly known as Exchange. And Pran Krishna, being the head of that auction exchange, would have been a highly qualified person. Though a householder, he was very much interested in the discussions on Vedanta. So that was what M felt, M was describing this Pran Krishna Mukherjee, that he was a apparently very successful person, being the head of an auction house, especially Mackenzie and such big auction houses. Unless you are very much qualified, you would not be appointed as the head of that house. So, but apart from his career, the success that he attained in his career, the position that he held, he was very devoted to Sri Ramakrishna also, and often came to see him. So one day he took Sri Ramakrishna to his house and held a celebration in honor of his coming there. So, and he was devoted, though he was very modern in his approach to life, but at the same time he had some orthodox practices. He used to go to Bagh Bazar Ghat, which is not very far from Shampukur, and when a boat is available, he will take that boat. Normally you have to cross, not cross, it's on the same side of the Ganges river. From Bagh Bazar to Dakshineshwar, you could go by boat. So he used to go to mostly people who are very orthodox, they prefer to take bath in the Ganga rather than take bath in their bathroom. And Ganga, because Ganges water is supposed to be very holy. So whenever he got a chance, he would take a boat after his bath and then go directly to Dakshineshwar to see Thakur. Today too, today on this day, particular day, 4th April, he has hired a boat. Hardly had it left the bank when the river became very choppy. You see, when there is a tide, when there is a high tide or a low tide, the waters from the sea either enters the river and it becomes very choppy. You might wonder, normally the Ganga is very calm and quiet. The flow is very, very still. But during tides, especially during tides, the waters can be very choppy because the water which enters the sea gets obstructed and there are waves are created. So that day, the river became very choppy and M asked Pran Krishna to let him off the boat. So M was a little worried. In spite of assurances of safety from Pran Krishna and his friends, he said, please allow me, I will not travel with you in boat. He was a bit afraid that the boat may overturn. So M insisted. He said, you must put me on land. I shall go to Dakshineshwar on foot, but I don't want to take a risk and go by boat. Though it is more convenient, but seeing the choppy waters, M was worried that the boat may capsize. So he said, please allow me, I will go by on foot. I will reach there. So Pran Krishna had to allow him. Pran Krishna, being aristocratic, he could afford a boat. So he was taking M and other people along with him. But M refused. He said, no, I can't travel by boat in this when the river is so full of turbulence, the choppy waters. So he preferred to go. One can go by foot from Bagh Bazar to Dakshineshwar, but it takes a lot of time. But he preferred to do that. Reaching Dakshineshwar, M finds Pran Krishna and others already they have reached because they have gone by boat. They have reached much earlier. There were others were talking with Thakur on spiritual matters. They had arrived a few moments before M, though they went maybe because of the choppy nature of the river, the choppy condition. They took time to reach and finally go to Thakur's room. And M, even though he went by walk, he reached there quickly, almost at the same time. He salutes Thakur by touching his head on the floor, that is M, and M is saying that he's describing what he himself did. Already when he sees all these people have already assembled, he goes and takes his seat. Now the subheading of this discussion is humanity and the divinity of incarnation. So that is the topic that will be discussed today. So Sri Ramakrishna is already started his conversation, is talking to Pran Krishna as recorded by M. So he says, but he is more manifest. He means the Lord is manifest more in a human being. If you say, he is anticipating this question, Thakur is anticipating a question and says, if you say, how can one who is subject to hunger, thirst, and other human needs, and who may be suffering from disease or sorrow, how can he be an avatara? If he's an avatar, if he's the Lord himself, if he is just suffering all the things which a human being suffers, hunger, thirst, all the other human needs and disease, sorrow, uh, apparently it is a kind of bondage. These are all bondages. Then the reply Sri Ramakrishna is that even Brahman laments when bound by the five elements. So whoever takes birth, so Prakriti, they say there are five elements: Agni, Aap, Tej, Vayu, everything, all the air, the five elements. That is what Sankhyan philosophy divides the whole manifest universe into five categories: solid, that is Prithvi; up, that is water; liquid; Tej, fire. Fire means anything that is volatile. Prithvi, up, Tej, Vayu, the air that you breathe; and Akasha, ether. So Akasha is space. So when creation begins, they say these are the five elements, the combination of which gives rise to creation. So he says even Brahman, if he gets bound by these five elements, the power of the gross universe is so powerful, the power is so great that even Brahman cries. I mean, it makes people cry. We have heard that the more gross we become in our lives, we cry, we lose property, we lose money, we feel hungry. There are so many sorrows associated when we become gross. But what about Brahman? He says even Brahman cries. So forget the condition of a human being who is really bound. Though Ishvara is not bound, but still the impact of the five elements is so much that it drags even a great spiritual person or even an incarnation has to lament. So he has to feel the ill effects of worldliness. When you say worldliness, I'm not saying a person living in a world has to be worldly. It is not the case. When I use the word worldliness, the word in Bengali is samsari. Samsari means one who moves, actually, literally. Moves means that which is transitory. The grosser the element, the more transitory it is. Solids get converted into gas, gas gets converted into liquid, solid becomes melts into liquids. This constant chemical reactions and interactions are going on. These things are more tangible when you become gross. So when you are under the influence of the five elements, there cannot be freedom. What is the bondage? The main bondage is that of the gross body, Annamaya Kosha. Then there is a subtle bondage of the prana, Pranamaya Kosha. Then you have the subtle bondage of the mind. They become lesser and lesser gross, more and more finer. But even an incarnation, if he takes up a human body, even an incarnation feels the pain, he laments. So this is a very big statement. If even incarnations suffer, then what will be our condition? So by just thinking, by just projecting our thoughts, we have to understand, as we mentioned in our Raj Yoga class, that every time you don't learn through pain or sorrow, we can even learn through the sorrow of others. A wise person learns through the sorrow of others. So we need not experience everything. We can use our judgment, our wisdom. A wise person says, a person who touches fire, he burns his finger. So I would be foolish if I also go and say, no, let me see whether it really burns. That would be a very gross mind. So Sri Ramakrishna here says, the impact of the gross world around us is so strong that even it makes an incarnation cry. So the bondage of the Panchabhuta, Panchabhuta Phande, Brahma Kande, Brahma, even Brahma cries. Kande means he cries. So that's the proverb. Even Brahma cries. Brahma, when he, Brahman means Brahman, not Brahma. Brahma is a word which is used for the eternal Lord. Even he, when he is under the grip of the five elements, even he is forced to cry. That is the very nature of the gross universe. So then he gives examples. You see Ramchandra, Sri Rama, when he came as Sri Rama, the incarnation of Rama, he wept in his suffering at Sita's pangs of separation. So when Sita was taken away in the forest, there were enough troubles when they were traveling in the forest, but at least he had Sita and Lakshman by his side. So even in incarnation, when Sita was taken away by Ravana, he felt that separation so strong that he even wept. Said, "What has happened? Where has my Sita gone?" So once he incarnated himself as a soul to kill Hiranyaksha, the demon. When Hiranyaksha had been killed, Narayana still did not want to go to heaven. There's another story. He assumes the form of a sow, a boar, they say, a big boar, a sow, who comes and he assumes a huge form. You can imagine, reincarnation himself becomes an animal. We have so many incarnations. Matsya Avatara, that is, he once incarnates as a fish. So after the Lord incarnates as a human being, there is suffering. But even he has sometimes to incarnate as an animal. That is what our tortoise, Kashyapa is also an avatara. He's one of the 10 avatars is a tortoise. So when he becomes a soul, when he kills the demon, that was the purpose why he was born as a very big boar. And after that, when he has been killed, Narayana, or the Lord himself, did not want to go to heaven. The reason being that he was so bound and he had a lot of children, a lot of litter. They had so many souls, they give birth to a litter. So he had a big family. He said, "How can I go?" He stayed in the body of the soul and had a big litter. He was very happy living with the young ones. So if that is the condition, you can imagine how an ordinary jiva suffers with his attachments to all the people around him. If taking a gross birth, falling a prey to the gross body, that is why Jesus and all Sri Ramakrishna, he said, "What is there in this body?" His wisdom told him that, "Why should I save this body? What is there after all? It's a combination of flesh and all the dirt that is inside. It is just a cage of bone and flesh." So that attitude enables one to touch the spirit. But very often the incarnation also fails to do it. That is what Sri Ramakrishna is saying. He was happy. He got the Lord incarnated as a boar and he killed the demon Hiranyaksha. Then the gods, Deva said, "Narayana, what are you doing? You have accomplished the job. Now you leave your family and give up this body and come back to assume your original form." Then he was very happy. He was so attached to his new incarnation. Then he said, the gods exclaimed, "What does it mean? Bhagwan doesn't want to return." So they all went to Shiva. These are all stories just to tell us that what is the price we have to pay for bondage. Bondage seems to be very nice. They just say even Narayana, he didn't get a human body, he took an animal body to serve a particular purpose. But it is so binding that this body bound him and he did not want to leave a boar's body, a soul's body. So the Devas got worried, if Narayana gets stuck in an animal body, what hope is there for human beings? We cannot get rid of attachments. We cannot tell people So Shiva went to Narayana and tried to persuade him to return. He said, "Come back." But it was that so was suckling its young ones, and everybody laughs. Everybody means those who are present there, Prana Krishna. Then Shiva had to say that I will destroy this body. And then he pierced with his trident. That is how the story goes. He had to take the extreme step of destroying that physical body. And Narayana came out laughing merrily. Though maybe it was a play, but anyway, that shows these stories they depict something very serious. That if Ramachandra, if all these incarnations, the 10 incarnations, when they assume a human body, there is a very big risk. The gross body has a capacity to bind us. So, oh human being, please beware. Don't let the gross to bind you. The bondage of the gross, the bondage of the subtle. You are the spirit, and you should focus on your existence as the spirit. You are Sachidananda. Even Sachidananda Brahma gets stuck when he takes the help of these 5 elements. So the 5 elements create such a havoc, even for gods, for incarnations. The idea behind the main takeaway from this story or this mythology is to warn human beings. If the Lord can succumb, then what about the poor man? A human being is helpless. Jiva is helpless. So he has to be more cautious, because even the Lord, when he takes up different gross bodies, he has to suffer. So that is why Sri Ramakrishna, Sharmi Shardananji says in the Great Master, that don't think that incarnation will be free from suffering. The cancer that he suffered, everything he suffers when he assumes a human body, all the rules and regulations, which apply to the ordinary jiva, apply to the Lord. But the only difference is he can detach himself, whereas the jiva, unless he does sadhana, he cannot detach. Sri Ramakrishna could say that there is the body, there is pain, let it be there. Oh, my mind, be free. So that detachment makes the whole difference between a spiritual person and a non-spiritual person. We discussed about raga and dvesha. We will be discussing about abhinivesha in our next Rajoga class, but raga and dvesha shows that how strong likes and dislikes can bind a person, especially strong likes in the gross sense. Our likes, strong gross likes and strong gross dislikes. We hate disease, we hate certain things, we hate pain, we hate separation, physical separation, we hate so many things in life. So Sri Ramakrishna says very clearly that even if the condition of God also becomes precarious when he takes when he is bound by this, so how much more if the bondage will be for human beings? Then Prana Krishna perhaps did not take it very seriously, or he just diverted. You see, sometimes when a harsh truth is told, when you speak a frank and very harsh truth of life, people simply want to avoid it. They said, "Oh, this is too much. If there will be too much of tension or depression if I listen." So Prana Krishna is slowly changing, and is changing the topic, and suddenly is asking, what is the anahata shabda? Now, what is, he is talking of bondage. Anahata comes at a very, very high, when you reach a very high spiritual state. So you are just taking a jump. You just can't ignore what Thakur has said. But anyway, Thakur is humble. He is very quietly answers. Sri Ramakrishna says, Anahata Shabda, because it's an important question. Sri Ramakrishna, of course, could discuss the most grossest thing and the most subtlest thing, because he had control over everything, the gross, the subtle, the mind, the cause, the causal samskaras, everything were as it were, they were on the palm of his hands. He could judge a person, see through the character of a person, understand what kind of bondage he is suffering from, what kind of, uh, just as Sri Ramakrishna said, I can see a person's mind as I see things which are kept in a glass cupboard. Just as we see objects seen in a glass cupboard, I can see the inner being of a human frame. It's like a cage, the cupboard, and I can read his mind just as I read the objects, see the objects in a glass case. The whole thing becomes so transparent. So here Sri Ramakrishna is asked a question which suddenly goes from the gross level of the five elements to which a human being is bound to Anahata Shabda. So he says it is a sound, it is the sound of Om which goes on continuously, effortlessly. What you utter is Ahata Shabda. What you don't utter is Anahata Shabda. So it originates in the Supreme Brahman. It is the first unuttered sound which is known as the cosmic music. It is the cosmic music which does not manifest itself as sound. Even before it manifests at the para sound, as we saw, para, then madhyama, then vaikhari, all these things we discussed in our the science of the mantra. But here, those 4 talks which we had, and the 5th talk was yesterday, where we discussed the importance of sound in our life, which here Sri Ramakrishna is talking about the same thing. What is Anahata Shabda? It is a primal sound. It has not been expressed as the heard sound. The heard sound means the vibration of the air which you feel in the eardrum is known as Ahata Shabda. When somebody says oo and ma, om, that is a sound, it is Ahata. But if it rises from the center of our consciousness, it originates as a unheard, unuttered sound. It is known as Anahata, not Ahata, Anahata, which is not uttered either by the mouth or even it is a sound which spontaneously, like a fountain, comes out of the supreme consciousness, the supreme Brahman who is within. Only yogis can hear it, not those who are attached to the sense world. If there is a least attachment to the gross sense world, that is why detachment is so important. When you detach from the gross, then you hear the subtle sounds. And Sri Ramakrishna tells something very significant. The yogis know, the true yogis, not one who is practicing yoga, the yogis know that this sound arises from the navel. And what does it do? And it also originates in the Supreme Brahman resting on the ocean of milk. Now, this is a very important thing to understand. What is this? According to Hindu mythology, the Lord rests on the Kshira Sagara. Kshira means milk. Sagara means sea. Now this Kshira Sagara is compared to the great cause, Mahakarana. At the end of each creation, the Lord has to rest. Srishti, Sthiti, Laya. Srishti means creation takes place. Then there is a maintenance period of maintenance, which is known as sthiti. You say status quo, and then you go to the pralaya, srishti sthiti laya, or srishti sthiti pralaya, the end of all creation. So it merges into the great cause. So that great cause, that great karana, of which our karana sharira is a small part, we are all parts of that big ocean, the karana. So that is known as the great cause, Mahakarana. So that Mahakarana has been depicted in our Puranas as a ocean. So where does the Lord stay in that ocean? He sleeps, he rests on the ocean of milk. For some reason, it's not just a ocean where there is water, but it is milk. Anyway, that is how it is described. So now Supreme Brahman rests on that ocean of milk when he is in a very uh, quiet state. There is no creation. That sound starts. That anahata dana is the dhvani is the sound, and it is not heard by the ear. It is a kind of cosmic sound which a person who has found his consciousness experiences. And it's not something like Om, you utter it, then there is a pause. Then Om, you say there is a pause. But this is an unuttered sound which goes on. Something like Sri Ramakrishna once said, it's like a whir of a motor. It's just a crude way of telling, but the sound which is continuously going on. But only yogis can hear it. It cannot be heard by the ordinary ear. Now, Keshav Sen's question, Sri Ramakrishna is referring to a question asked by Keshav Sen. Because Pran Krishna asks him, Sir, what is the afterlife like? This is a very important question. Everybody wants to know what happens after death. Is there an afterlife? So Pran Krishna is asking this question. It is an eternal question. No matter how many times it is answered, we still have this question because these are not perceivable things. We have not perceived what happens after death. So people ask, my relative has died, somebody has died, what has happened? Now in what state he is in? So Sri Ramakrishna says this is a very important question. If there is an afterlife, how is it like? What is it like to live beyond the physical death? So Sri Ramakrishna says, Keshav Sen asked the same question. So Sri Ramakrishna now gives the answer. He says, as long as man lives in ignorance, ajnana, or it is known as avidya, asmita, in Patanjali's yoga, it is known as avidya. So, as long as a man lives in ignorance, in other words, what he means, Thakur means is, in other words, as long as he does not realize his identity with the Lord, as long as he does not realize that he is Brahman, his true nature, till that happens, he has to be born again and again into this world. So afterlife presupposes that sooner or later, after death, will be born. But when he has attained jnana, when all the ignorance has gone, then he does not have to come to the world any longer, to the earth or to any other world. Now, what is the any other world? The any other world, he means the subtle world, which is an interim period. In the interim period before the birth of before a person is born again in another body, he has to, in the spirit or the soul, with all the samskaras, the karana, sharira, and all the little prana which goes with the body, which becomes a vehicle which carries all the samskaras, the karmashaya, which determines your jati, ayu, and bhoga. We have discussed this so many times. What does karmashaya do? We carry everything. Nothing is left behind. All that is left behind is the panchabhutas, the 5 gross elements, all the combinations, all the gold that we have collected, all the bricks, structures that we have built, which are known as our homes, even the body, all the 5 elements constitute, everything is left behind. But what goes with us? It is the karana sharira, the subtle body and the causal body. Both of them you cannot change. You have to carry that baggage of karma. It is like when you go board a train, you board a train with a certain luggage. Unless you dump that luggage on the way, you will be landing in a station, you will be stopping at a station where you will get down. You will have to get down with the whole baggage because you have boarded the train with that baggage. So also, the different worlds which Sri Ramakrishna is speaking, they allow you to continue your sadhana in some way or the other. Though it is very difficult, one has to be born again, it becomes very easier to, unless we have that habit of subtle sadhana, it cannot continue in that world where we live till we are born again. So that's why they say human birth is so valuable. When you get a body, please see that before you give up the body, you have to reach the highest. So he says he does not have to come to the world if he attains jnana, because all his baggage, everything he has left, he has cleared all his uh, karma, then he doesn't have to go in heaven or any other place temporarily or permanently. He will just be his own self. And another beautiful example Thakur gives now. He says the potter puts his pots out to dry in the sun. You see, the potter, you know how a pot is made. We take the clay, wet clay, shape it using certain devices, certain instruments, they rotate round and round, and you make different shapes. Then, after that wet pots are created, they are kept for drying in the sun. Until they are dry, when become very hard, some of the pots dry very quickly. Maybe some pots there is more water, they don't dry. And as they are left outside, a cow or some other animal, in those days in villages, they had no other place. They had to just keep these pots for drying in the open sun. And in that courtyard or that place, somehow a cow or some animal, goats or anything happen to walk over them, some of them will break. If a hard pot breaks, the potter throws it away, for it is of no use. Suppose a pot has totally dried, it is not wet. He has to throw it because he cannot reuse it. Once it is baked, once the pot is hard, if it breaks, you have to throw it. The pieces are of no use. But if a soft one breaks, he collects its clay. If it is, pot is still soft, and a cow or a animal has run over it, it has broken, no doubt, but the clay is still soft. So he takes that clay, mixes it with the already existing clay and makes another pot. He puts it again on the wheel. That means the example is such a beautiful example that unless one has realized God, one has to go back into the hands of the potter. That means if you have realized you are like a dry pot, the moment it breaks, bus, you don't have to be born again as another pot. If you are still wet, if your ajnana is still there, if you have not realized God before the body pot breaks, then you will be molded and another pot will be made. That is, you will get another body, again you do karma, again you get a body. So one has to repeatedly return to this world. So wet pot means you are attached to the world. Dry pot means you are totally detached. You have realized God. You have no connection with the gross. And then you have that full knowledge. And that knowledge, the sun of knowledge dries the pots. And when it breaks, whether it breaks or whether it is full, the pot has no rebirth. It will not be turned into clay because it has already. Then he gives another example. He is not satisfied. Thakur is not satisfied with one example. He says, what is the use of sowing boiled paddy seed? You know, when the seeds are raw, I mean, if the seeds are preserved, even if they are dried, they can sprout. But if they are burnt on fire or if they are boiled, say in water, then the sprouting capacity is destroyed forever. So you can't boil paddy, and that boiled grain, if you plant rice, it will not, that paddy seed, if it is used as a seed directly, then it may sprout if it gets the right water. But if it is cooked or baked or anything is done, fried, destroyed, then it can never sprout into a plant. So he says, similarly, just as a baked pot, the fire of jnana bakes or burns dagdha bija avastha. All our samskaras are burnt. Then there is no new creation. He doesn't have to be born. He regains his original self, that is Satchidananda. He remains in bliss. He doesn't have to come again and again in this sorrowful world. So, but Sri Ramakrishna now has not finished with this conversation, because he has been asked what is after life. So he is telling under which conditions you are born again, by giving this pot example and the seed example, and then under which conditions you are not born. So here now the conversation is going on, but the topic changes. Vedanta and ego. What does ego do? Vedanta and the awareness of a witness, a sakshi, who is detached. So what is jnana? What is vijnana? These are wonderful explanations given by Thakur. He says, according to the Puranas, the devotee is one entity and Bhagwan is another. I mean, those who believe in God with form, they never say, I am God. They say, I am a jiva, I am a devotee, and I am devoted to my Lord, who is known as Bhagwan, my Ishta. I and you means God. I and you are separate entities. The body is only a small earthen bowl. So inside the body, the body is like an earthen bowl. Inside the body, the body is like our Annamaya Kosha, the bowl, the earthen bowl. Inside the pot or inside the bowl is the mind, intellect, the water of ego. So Sri Ramakrishna is giving an example now. Our body is not everything. Inside there is water, and the water of ego, he has compared water to the water of ego. So in a pot you pour some water, and Brahman is like the sun. He is reflected in the water. I don't think anybody has explained it so beautifully. Sri Ramakrishna, in his very simple rustic language, he says, see, this body is like a pot. Your mind and other things are like the air inside, and then the water is your ego, the strong ego that thinks I am holding, I am of the shape of the pot. Now, in that water, there is a sun, the pot is obviously in the sun outside. So Brahman is like the sun, it is reflected. So that reflection a person sees. Thus the devotee sees the form of the Lord through that reflection, through that ego. So he has to maintain an ego as a pakami, as he say that if the ego doesn't go, make him a servant ego, that I am the child of a Lord, of Brahman, or that reflection, that form which has come. The eyes, as Sri Ramakrishna last time we discussed, that when water solidifies into ice, it has a form. It is the same formless takes a form. So also devotee sees the form of the Lord. It is a reflection, no doubt. It's not the original sun. But even the reflection will take us to the original sun. So when we worship a God with form, we gave so many examples that he is like a door. And then we go into the vast formless space outside. But a door is required. So also the reflection takes us to the original sun. We may see the reflection, but it is the original sun, that is Brahman. The reflection is the Lord, the God with form. So when you see the form merging into the formless, when we do sadhana, when we repeat mantra, it is the formless that we are trying to reach. But the way is through, first we have to see the reflection. When we see the reflection, then we see the real sun. So in Vedanta, Sri Ramakrishna is continuing. See the wonderful philosophy, the way he explains. He says in the Vedanta, only Brahman is real. All else is Maya, like a dream. It is a non-entity, like the reflection. The stick of I-ness, that ego, lies on the ocean of Satchidananda. And then he tells M, listen to this carefully. You see, he knows that M is recording everything. M is noting some points. He will go and record everything. And one day it will find the light of the day and the gospel will be written. Thakur knew everything. So he is now and then, when he talks about something very important, he will tell M, don't be casual, listen carefully to what I am saying. Otherwise, if you miss this point, you will not understand what it is. So what is this ego? What is this I? It is like a stick on the ocean of Satchidananda. If you take this stick of ego out, there remains only one ocean of Satchidananda. But as long as there is a stick of ego, it looks split into two. The water in a pot, say, forget the ocean, even in a pot, you put a stick inside, you think there is water on this side and water on that. It looks as if it's split into two. One part of water here, one part of water there. When one attains the knowledge of Brahman, that stick, it's like removing the stick. So one goes into samadhi, this I-ness vanishes. So he is explaining samadhi in such a beautiful language. What ego does, ego creates a partition. Ego creates that idea that we are jivas, that we are weak, we are strong, we are rich, we are poor, depending on our ego, depending on the stick, it will create a part in that big ocean. Till we realize that stick vanishes and we become one with the ocean, we will continue to suffer. That ego doesn't go. Ego is because of ajnana. That is what Sri Ramakrishna is saying. For this reason, Shankaracharya preserved his eye of knowledge to teach mankind. Since the ego will not go, let it be a good ego. Shankaracharya decided, I will keep a good ego, not the bad ego, which makes me worldly, which says me, my family, my children, my relatives. I will give up that worldly ego, but I will retain the ego of knowledge to teach mankind. So Sri Ramakrishna says it is very difficult to remove the ego. Like the Ashwatha tree, no matter how many times you cut the banyan tree, from the roots again a tree will spring up. So he says the ego is like that. So Shankaracharya, he knew that the ego has to be there. As long as you have a human body, the stick will be there, but let it be a ripe ego, not a raw ego. Raw ego will make us suffer more and more and more. A ripe ego will help us get rid of suffering. But to Pranakrishna is saying, now he has told him to record what he says very carefully. But again he says to Pranakrishna, but a Jnani, a man of spiritual knowledge, has certain characteristics. Before even Pranakrishna asks, how do I recognize a Jnani? You said for a Jnani, this ego vanishes. He sees reality as it is. But how do I recognize? If there is a Jnani amongst us, how do I recognize him? So Sri Ramakrishna, anticipating this question, he says he has certain characteristics. One may think that he has attained Jnana, but if somebody says, I have attained Jnana, he should have some characteristics. So one can test. If somebody claims he has Jnana, and if he doesn't have these characteristics, Sri Ramakrishna says, then he is not a Jnani. One of the characteristics is he can't harm anybody. Second characteristic is becomes like a child. A child doesn't have ego. He becomes childlike. He doesn't become childish. Childish means you behave in such a way. A childish behavior is not a behavior without ego. But a childlike behavior is without ego. Childish behavior means it has a very strong ego where the child says, I want my toys. If somebody touches its toys, it just bursts out, it gets angry. That is childish behavior. I hold on to my possessions, I hold on to my family, and I am absolutely attached to them, then you can say that fellow has a childish behavior. He's childishly holding on to his possessions. Like a child grabs and holds the toys, the sweets, said, I'm not going to give this. No matter how much pressure is there from outside, he will just keep grabbing it with his raw ego. That is childish. But here, Sri Ramakrishna says he's childlike. Childlike means has the innocence of a child. He cannot harm anybody. He doesn't doubt anybody. He doesn't criticize anybody. He just becomes childlike, absolutely pure. So, these are the signs of a Jnani. Otherwise, how do we know it? Sri Ramakrishna's own life, Holy Mother's life, they were childlike. They were childlike in the sense they could not harm anybody. They had a very compassionate heart. They saw the Lord everywhere. So how does it happen? So Sri Ramakrishna says, Paras Mani, that is a philosopher's stone. It is translated as philosopher's stone. It is Paras Mani. When the philosopher's stone, they say, when it touches a steel sword, it becomes gold. Now, this may be a myth, but that is what they believe. Paras Mani means you touch that stone, all the iron and steel sword becomes gold. So what happens if it becomes gold? The gold cannot injure. So a person who has been touched by this Paras Mani or the philosopher's stone, outwardly Thakur says you may see anger and egoism in him. Just as you see in a child, sometimes he behaves as if he has ego, but you take the toy away from him, he is happy. He says, no, I will not. So Sri Ramakrishna says such Jnani will be like that. But outwardly you may see some semblance of anger and ego in him. But in reality, the Jnani has none. That is what Sri Ramakrishna says. And he gives another example. You see, he is not telling any philosophy. There are so many examples. He continuously, he used to say, Ma Ras Thele Diche, means mother is sending knowledge in heaps and bounds. Heaps of knowledge she is giving me. I don't have to think. So these examples just are coming one after another. He says, what is the idea of characteristic of a Jnani? From a distance, a burnt piece of rope looks like a rope. It has been burnt. It has the shape of a rope, but if you go near it and touch it or blow it, it's just blows away. It just doesn't remain. It had a semblance of a rope. So also, the anger of a Jnani, he may exhibit. We have seen some great saints. They just, Thakur, for example, Holy Mother, sometimes they behave out of, as Thakur used to say, you can hiss but don't bite. That is the advice he had given. You can hiss, just have a semblance of anger. Don't be angry from inside. You don't have an ego. There is only a semblance of anger and ego in a Jnani. And that ego is also not harmful. Ego is a pakami. As Shankaracharya had ego, that I am giving knowledge to everybody. But it was a positive ego. In reality, he doesn't have that anger or ego in him. It is just like that burnt piece of rope. It looks like an ego, but the moment you touch these people, these Jnanis, there is that ego vanishes. So also, Sri Ramakrishna gives a third example. The child has no attachment. It makes a dollhouse, and if anybody touches it, it cries loudly, jumping around in protest. Says, oh, this person is touching my... Later it breaks the dollhouse itself. It has made a house. When it is making the house, the childlike behavior, he makes that house. There's a beautiful song in Bengali, Baul song. So, Sapta Bhuvana Dhvansa Holeo means he builds a mansion of 7 stories. In his mind, of course. These poor Bauls or Fakirs. There's a beautiful song in Bengali which says he creates a mansion of 7 floors. These are all deeply mystical songs. He creates a mansion of 7 floors, Sapta Bhuvana, seven floors. You imagine in those days it was a huge thing. And even if it collapses and reduces to dust, the the Paramahamsa is not bothered. He creates, he destroys like a child. He makes a house for a doll, and when he's making, or maybe he makes a house in sand with the wet sand, and he plays. But when he is playing, if you go and disturb him, he gets angry. But it's just a show of anger. After the house is made, he's so detached that a wave comes, and all, if the wave doesn't come and destroy it, before going, he will just kick it and say that I have destroyed the house I created. But before that, he will show anger if somebody, he will protest, but he later on breaks the doll house itself. Sometimes Sri Ramakrishna is giving some wonderful examples. You see how sharp his observation is. Sometimes the child obstinately says, "My father gave this cloth to me. I will not give it to you." And next moment, within a few moments, it will forget the cloth. And if you give it a doll, it will play. Then even if you take the cloth, few minutes ago he was saying, no, this is my father has given me, I will not give you. Later on it says, it forgets, takes up and leaves the cloth behind and goes away. So what Sri Ramakrishna says, these are the signs of a Jnani. Perhaps see, he gives some more example, more concrete, which we can identify. He is very rich. Perhaps he is very rich. He has big pictures in his house. And then in those days, horse-driven carriage was like an automobile. But he leaves behind all and then goes to Kashi. I mean, he's talking of the Vanaprasthis. The king Janaka, he said, I may be a king, but he had enough jnana to give up everything. When everything is destroyed, he said, fine, nothing has happened. So that is the sign of a Paramahamsa. So he may work very hard, he may build a house, but all the time he knows my goal is to realize God. So when he goes to Kashi, he leaves behind everything. So that is what Sri Ramakrishna is giving examples, that how this detachment has to be practiced. When one becomes a Paramahamsa, he is not to attach to anything. Today is here, he doesn't want to say that things should happen this way or that way. As I told you, it is so difficult to surrender fully to the Lord. That let things are happening now in a good way, let them happen. Suppose tomorrow things happen in some other way, let it happen. I remain the same. The child is happy. His father gives him a cloth, he holds on to it, but somebody gives him a toy, he said, okay, you take away the cloth. That is how our attitude should be. He builds a house, but he should be ready to leave everything and go to Kashi. That is what he says. According to Vedanta, another example he gives, even the state of waking is of no significance. A woodcutter was dreaming when somebody woke him up. Irritated, he cried out, why have you disturbed my sleep? You see, this is another subtle way. Sri Ramakrishna is explaining how we get into a delusion. He's using an analogy of dream, deep sleep, and everything. He says a woodcutter was dreaming. In the dream, he was a king and a father of 7 boys. So you imagine how happy he was in the dream. And he was very angry with the person who woke him up. You see, I was in that dream world, a king. Now you have woken me up. You have now woken me up, and now I see that I am just a woodcutter. All my kingdom, all my 7 sons, everything is gone. The boys had already been educated. He was in his dream, he was educating these boys. See, we have our own dreams. We want our children, grandchildren, they will be like this, they will be like this, and so much of plans. I sent a beautiful message on Asha from Vairagya Shatakam. How hopes and Asha means hope, how it takes us, deludes us, makes us Hope after hope. Oh, this will happen, that will happen, things should happen this way. Things should happen this way. Oh, my son will do this, my grandson. We even don't dream about the grandson. So he was in a dream, he was dreaming about a kingdom which was not his, but in the dream he thought it was so real. He was sitting on a throne, 7 sons, very powerful. And then he is terribly angry with the person. He is getting angry. He said, why did you destroy my kingdom? My world of happiness, why did you destroy it? The man said, the man who woke him, what a foolish thing are you telling? It was a dream. What does it matter if you lose 7 sons or the kingdom? The woodcutter said, go on. You do not understand. Now the woodcutter is explaining to the person who woke him up. To be a king in a dream is as true for me as to be a woodcutter. If it is true to be a woodcutter, because he was a Gyani, if it is true to be a woodcutter, then it is also true to be a king in a dream. That means both are equally unreal. This is how Sri Ramakrishna is giving wonderful examples. We, of course, think when we come back to the real world that the dream was unreal. But is the waking state real? We have made a big fuss and think it is real because it is. We most of the time we live in a waking state, but there are people who live more in a dream state, and there are some people who live in a coma. The whole world, their whole property may be there, but they are helpless to enjoy it because the waking world is not real for them. They are perhaps lying on a bed, they are having dreams, beautiful dreams. For them, it really doesn't matter whether they own 10 million or 10 billion pounds. It really doesn't matter because now they are on the bed, they are lying down, the dream world is there, that is more real for them. Or the sleep, if they are missing sleep, they are happy if they go to sleep, if they are given some anesthesia and they go to sleep. They want to go that. They forget everything about the waking world, which was very real for them. A few years ago, this property, this possessions, they practically made him mad. That was so real. But when he's on the bed, when he is suffering, all the dream world and other things become real. In his dream, perhaps he may dream that, oh, whatever the wealth, perhaps it will be used nicely, which normally doesn't happen. The children may just misuse it, but nothing is in his hand. So let him dream, he dreams something. So that is why a Gyani says, if dream is real, then even the waking, if dream is unreal, as you are telling me, don't tell me that. For me, the dream is equally real or equally unreal. Then the waking state is also unreal. That analogy or that idea makes us think deeply about the worthlessness of the world outside. The waking world, which we hold so dear to us, it becomes absolutely worthless. For a philosopher, I mean for a Gyani, it's not for everybody. That stage will come in our life when we realize the worthlessness. When Thakur said, Taka Mati, Mati Taka, Hriday thought he is mad. What are you saying? How can the mud from the bottom of the Ganga, filth, be as good as the coin? And like a mad person, you have thrown it into the water, saying Taka Mati, Mati Taka. But a Gyani knows, just as my dream has gone away, I was a king with such, living in such a wonderful glory. And another moment I am a woodcutter. So if you have that person who woke him up said, if your fact that you are a woodcutter is real, then even that you are a king is also real. But if you say the king was unreal, the dream state was unreal, then why are you bothered whether you are a woodcutter? Why do you want to be a king? It can be anything. So that is how Jnana inspires. That is true wisdom. That we don't try to analyze ourselves. Don't let these upadhis, these labels, That is a word which normally we use in when we are in uh, doing a job. We have different labels. I am the boss. He is the. All these labels are useless. These are known as upadhis in Vedanta. These labels are known as upadhis. These upadhis are there, equally real or equally unreal. And the sooner you realize that, the more we live a life of the spirit. As spirit, nobody can destroy us. But as dreamers, or as waking people, or as deep sleep, every state is unreal. All the three states are unreal. That is how Thakur is now teaching Jnana. So Pran Krishna is always talking about Jnana. That is why Thakur is telling him about the state of a Jnani. Now he is talking a state of a Vijnani. We will not discuss this. It's already time. He is hinting at its own state. There is a state above Jnana. So let that be left for the next class. We will just conclude today. So there is one question, just one question I'll answer and we will conclude for today. The question is, was listening to another Maharaja, Trailokyananda, about rebirth. He said once a person dies, the same person never is reborn. As an example, he says an individual is like a wave on an ocean. Once the wave dies, it is the end of the individual. When a new wave rises in the ocean, it is another individual. All individuals are part of the ocean. That is the concept of birth and death, birth and rebirth. Same person does not come back. No, it is the same person who comes back. This is something you have to understand. The jivahood, because of the ego, that I-ness remains. So though we don't remember all our past births, that identity still remains. The wave which was part of the ocean, a big wave has become a small wave in its new incarnation. But still, that there is that identity that I was a big wave, now I am a small wave. So the jiva, till it gets liberated, till it becomes one with the ocean, it will be tossed around from one ego into another. It has the ego of a say person A. The person A physical body dies, but the baggage does not die. The karma ashay does not die. We don't remember our previous births because when you are born, all the memory and other things become very weak. But yogis can remember. Buddha remembered all his 500 lives. It is the same soul which takes birth again and again till it is released. So it is not right to say that one wave has died and then everybody will get mukti when they die. They become ocean. No, they don't become ocean. That is very important to understand. We don't become the ocean. We die as a wave to be born as another wave. If we went to the bottom of the ocean, became one with the ocean, then there's no question. We will never, but that doesn't happen at the surface. Right now, we are at the surface. We are gross. Are we ready to give up the gross? Are we ready to say that this money, that wealth and the body and everything is a superstition? That is why it's so difficult. It is very easy to talk about Jnana. Because Pran Krishna wanted to know Jnana, Thakur is telling him very frankly, it is so difficult to be a Jnani. You have to feel that this body is an illusion. Swamiji says very powerfully, in the West, you think you are Jnanis. You think Jnana is such a easy thing. Every moment you have to remember, if there is pain, if there is pain in the body, or if anything, you have to constantly repeat, I am not the body. We cannot even give up attachment to our children and a little money that we have. So how can we be Jnanis? So Sri Krishna is telling that the day that happens, you find that the waking state, the fact that you are a woodcutter or the fact that you are a king in a dream, when they both look alike, when the world, the things, the gross things of the world lose their importance, you think of yourself as a spirit, then only you consider yourself as an ocean. The wave vanishes, the ocean alone remains. That for that you have to go deep. For that, you have to go deep within. As the Kathopanishad says, you cannot, the kingdom of God is not outside. No matter how much you try, it is always inside. You have to go deep into the ocean to feel that you are one with the ocean. But if we remain in the world, the turbulent world outside, no matter how, what a beautiful world it is. Some people really want to enjoy the world. It is fine, nothing wrong. But we have to, then we have to follow the rules of the waves. One wave will go, it will form itself, small, big, always clashing with each other. That wavy, that turbulence will remain. Choice is ours. Nobody asks us to go and dive deep. But if you want to become one with the ocean, as you have asked the question now, if we want to become one with the question, then we have to give up these waves. We can't remain on the surface. We have to go deep. That is why the Upanishads say again and again, you can't realize that Brahman when you are in the gross world. And Jesus was more frank. He said you can't have God and mammon at the same time. Mammon means wealth. If wealth is more dear, then be happy with the waves. Sometimes you will have more wealth, sometimes you will have less wealth. But Jesus was most frank. Our Upanishads are a little more subtle. They don't hurt you much. Jesus was very brutally frank when he said, you forget God then. If you want mammon, but then that discourages a lot of people. Upanishads are slightly, though they speak the truth, frank truth, but they say only when you go inside. They literally plead, don't go outside, don't be extrovert, go inside. That is where you will find the Atman. At least they are very moderate. They just don't frighten you. The Upanishad says there are two choices, Shreya and Preya. If you are happy with the Preya, go run after it. They don't force you. Whereas Jesus' religion is, or Buddha and all, they say nothing doing. First renounce the world. When you give it up, then you talk about religion, about the spirit. But the Vedas know our deficiency, they know our defects. They said, do it slowly, just get it tossed around a little bit in the ocean. And when you go deeper, then you find that peace. You will get a taste of peace when you touch the spirit. So it's a question of how one teaches this truth. Thakur also was more or less, sometimes he was very direct, he was very frank. He would not compromise. Just as Jesus said, you can't have both. Either you forget God or you forget mammon. You can't have both. But Thakur said, okay, you give up slowly because I know you can't do it. You do it. The less you are attached to the gross, the more you are attached to the subtle. The more you are nearer to the Atman, the more you are nearer to the peace, the more you become one with the ocean. Don't dream that I will be with the waves, I will jump around, at the same time I will have peace. It cannot happen. If you come to the surface, there will be turbulence. If you dive deep, you will have peace. So that is how it is explained. Thank you. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.